You can have it all, just not all at once.
Do we pursue greatness and all the pains and sacrifices it asks for? Or do we surrender to the peace of normalcy, but at the risk of living a life of regret, having chosen what could be a path of mediocrity? This 2024 lesson tackles my struggle between living a life of glorious ambition and living a life of grounded fulfillment. I could choose one, somehow balance both, or go full Eren mode and set it all ablaze. All my life, I have been afraid of failure, of judgment, of loss, of change. You guys already know that, just to name a few. But now I've gone to the point where I even fear for myself. Success or happiness? Choose one. That's the ultimatum I've laid down upon myself during the last months of 2024. The pain of having to choose between a life of ambition and a life of realistic and practical fulfillment is indescribably one of the most under-discussed yet most existential dilemmas that we can come across in our lives. The path to greatness isn't necessarily a kind one. We all know that. We're all aware that a life in the pursuit of success, ambition, greatness, and legacy isn't really for the light-hearted. Sacrifice and pain are embedded into glory and success. One must ready the resolve to bleed and for the things they have to be lost. During the late months of 2024, me and my friends went on an unplanned drinking/podcast night. I only went there for a project, but it rained and there was liquor in the fridge and we all know what happens next. In accordance with tradition, of course, we just had to hold a bro podcast and that lasted for 5 hours. And this topic, which I brought up, lasted for 3 out of 5 of those hours. During the conversation, we also talked about the path of greatness and how it requires sacrifice. Names of GOATs such as T1 Faker from League and Kobe, we all know Kobe, were brought up in order to really drive down the example of how much effort and determination is required or is asked of someone when they want to be the GOAT. I don't know much about Faker and his backstory based from what my bros were telling me about his rise to the top as a League player. He's been through a lot. He basically had laser-focused commitment that he will be the best. And it just made me wonder how much he had to sacrifice in order to achieve that trophy or wear that crown and be the best of the best in the competition. Let's go to Kobe because I'm more familiar with Kobe. We're all familiar of the Mambo mentality. You know, being the first one in the gym. It's routine. We've all heard of that typical cliche inspirational story when it comes to people who have achieved great things. And they're cliche for a reason. You're supposed to sweat, you're supposed to bleed, and sometimes even cry, but people aren't supposed to see that. It's not an easy path to take. There's also some sort of weight to it. Everybody talks about the weight of the crown once you're up there, but I believe there's also the weight we carry on the way to greatness. Like the weight of pursuing a path of ambition. And of course, the grander the ambition, the heavier the weight. There's also the idea of purpose.
Most purpose is more burden than glory. And trust me, you never want to be the guy who avoids it because you can't live with the burden.
Some of you already drove the point down, so I'm not gonna go into that. So having a vision, having a dream, is a double-edged blade. And speaking about dreams, if my greatest dream is to be remembered by everyone, it would only make sense that my biggest fear is to be forgotten by anyone. This fear actually fuels my ambition to make something of my life, but I've come to realize this 2024 that it could also lead me to be isolated, especially emotionally. We actually touched upon this during our late night podcast. Joseph, one of the bros there, we will actually talk about him more later. He told me that to him, it doesn't matter if he isn't the GOAT in something or he's regarded as the best in a certain field. All that matters is that he's remembered for who he is and not what he has actually achieved. He wants it so that when you ask people in his funeral about him or like how they knew him when he was still alive, he would like to have those answers to be very, let's just say, personal and unique. To him, he doesn't want to be known for that one big thing he achieved in life. He wants to be remembered or cherished for who he is based on how the people or the person knew him. Like, to him, it doesn't matter if he, I don't know, he's not a millionaire, a billionaire, or made some sort of groundbreaking, revolutionary discovery. He's basically content with being remembered as that guy who was kind of goofy back then during first year college. It made me think, yes, let's say I do build a legacy. Everyone remembers me. But will anyone really know me at all? Okay, here we go again. I'm gonna bring this up again. This was a huge part of my 2024, so it's very difficult to avoid talking about it. My experience with, offered me a peek of what it means to live a normal life. A life which I considered to be, for a long time, a life of mediocrity and normalcy. I was bound to the path of hypocrisy, solitude, and suffering. The blessing, in which I begged the God for 3 years straight, has finally arrived into my life when I searched for it the least. It wasn't just a rom-com plot, nor was it even an escape to the stresses of my family life. It was salvation, a way out, a ticket to a normal life. A life that I thought a soul like me, a soul that believes deep within them that they have committed grave sins in their past lives, won't ever deserve. It's just one of my delusions back then. Statues and paintings of me are great, but residing in a tomato farm, a countryside library with 4 kids and a loving wife, is definitely something else. And it took me more than years to even entertain that such a thought was feasible and acceptable. The thing is, growing up, I've always thought that the greatest purpose or the meaning of life and why we exist is so that we can attain something great, like to make something worth of our existence. Of course, 2024 came and I dated somebody for the first time in my life, something I thought I would never ever do. And during that time and my experience, I've finally come to understand as to why people can settle for a normal life. No grandiose ambitions, no desires for world domination, no need to become a goat, but simply living out a life of making the ones you love smile. It wasn't only until last year when I finally had the chance to see a glimpse of that life. Making somebody you love smile, I can't describe the feeling. It's just something else. Seeing that smile on their face, seeing them happy, is as fulfilling as becoming the best in something. When it comes to greatness and ambition, I thought that wouldn't be matched by a simple smile on somebody's face. Living life just to see other people live their lives happily. It wasn't only until early 2024 when I finally started to internalize that such a life isn't necessarily bad. As I've mentioned a while ago, a path of greatness requires you to carry weight. And a lot of people aren't really willing to carry that weight. I've met people who also are content with living a life of experience. To them, it doesn't matter if they don't leave a mark in history. They just simply want to live out as many experiences as they can. I just can't really wrap my head around it. But on the other side of the coin, you have a life of ambition. That I can understand as to why people don't like it. Like here, for example, nostalgic solitude or solitary nostalgia. Am I at my peak only when I am alone? And that's one of the prices to pay when you're on the path of greatness. You're supposed to lose things. So I can already hear some of you talking about you can choose both. The thing is, this 2024, I finally met the third person of my 3 big options in life. The 3 being listed here. Number 1, a life of story and smiles. This is basically the life of experience that I was talking about a while ago. A life dedicated to making people around you smile. Number 2, a life of legacy and that one thing, that one monumental achievement that you've dedicated your entire life work for. And 3, a compromise. Basically a mix of both. And here's where Joseph comes back into play. He told me that he at one point was committed to life path number 2, the one with legacy and ambition. He basically had grand dreams for himself until, as with everybody, reality and society came knocking down the door and told him that, buddy, that's not really, So he thought, okay, that's not possible. So let's just make everybody around me smile as much as I can. Life path number 1. But then he thought about having regrets. Like, at one point, you were having these grand dreams of ambitions for yourself, and then Again, there's nothing wrong with life path number 1. It's just that when you are at life path number 2 for so long, like you're committed to it, and then you suddenly find yourself in life path number 1, I myself would be crushed, at least eternally. I won't really show it to the people around me, but I know the choice I made. And that, like I mentioned in the first part of the video, that is a life of regret. It's not as bad, but you'll still remember the shots you didn't take. Then he started thinking about the compromise. What if he could choose both? In a nutshell, this is the compromise he thought of. A young adult career of competitiveness and limit pushing, akin to that of the levels in which somebody like, again, Faker and Kobe have attained. This is then followed by a stay at the top, a steady and fighting drop, the people below you have patiently waited for years, until finally you decided it's time to retire, hang the towel, call it a day, settle somewhere, and start a family. It's an end to something that I thought was never ending. For me, I've always thought that I was meant to be bound to the second option no matter what I do, for reasons so absurd and delusional. I know it's plain stupid, but I thought that if being delusionally insane and irrational can lead me to a path of greatness, then so be it. What Joseph here is trying to argue is that we can commit to something for, let's say, about 10 to 15 years, just that one thing, and you'll try to claw your way up to the top as quickly as possible. I mean, 15 years isn't that short, but it's still quite compressed. If you were to compare it to, let's say, a lifelong work dedicated to one thing, like you have 60 years, for example, on your project. Okay, let's say you're done with your push for greatness, at least a 15-year push for greatness. You finally take what you were able to achieve, then you can finally start to settle somewhere. Look into the dating world. This is kind of already contrary to societal expectations. Starting to date at late 30s sounds like a nightmare to most people, but that's why it's a compromise. There's still the sacrifice part from the ambition aspect of things. But at least you're still giving yourself a chance to live out a normal life. The thing is, with going for the compromise, my problem with it is it might hinder you mentally or internally because you'll have a plan B. People who chose path 2 and are committed to seeing path 2 or life choice 2 till the end are people who have, I wouldn't necessarily say nothing to lose, but people who have no room for error. Make it or break it type of people. Basically, they have the pressure of, I wouldn't also call it desperation, but they have the weight of should. And that is a double-edged blade. You have to do something. The lengths in which a person will go in order to achieve what they have to do, it's scary. That deserves a video of its own, but for me personally, I would do anything to have both a legacy cemented, my name marked in history, and some sort of groundbreaking invention that made leaps in innovation, and at the same time being able to live out a modest life peacefully and being the best person I can be to those who love me. Now, thanks to my shout out to her again, even though she doesn't care anymore, she's allowed me to see that I can live out life number 1, or in this tweet, option number 2. I would do anything because at the end of the day, even if I claim that I'm just looking for something or someone to die for, I'm still human and I have emotions and all the other flaws and bugs per se that humans have. My first relationship, my first try at dating, although short-lived, has allowed me to realize that there's nothing wrong with living a life of making the person you love the happiest person they can be. It's actually pretty fulfilling. I guess I'll just put it this way. 24 made me feel the most human I've ever been. I want to love and be loved, something I've seen as both a weakness and a strength of having a heart. A conflict in which the two extreme sides of me are constantly in friction. I've always seen my brain or my internal voices as a government of some sort. Basically, I have a Homer Council up there. And as of now, as of making this video, they're still quite conflicted on this entire ambition and normal life thing. They are finally exploring into the possibility of going for a compromise. However, there's still some counter arguments that still need to be ironed out per se. At least it's an improvement because at the one point back then, I've always seen life choice number 1 to be something that's just not possible for me. So I know this lesson is all over the place. It's getting pretty lengthy. This wasn't actually supposed to be lesson number 3, And this was supposed to be a series of its own, and I was going to split this topic into different subtopics because it's that complex and intricate, but it was such an important lesson to me this 2024. I guess I'll leave you future homers this, let's just say, parting wisdom, as well as to you viewers who stayed for this long in the video somehow. We believe that the path to greatness or happiness isn't really about choosing one or the other, because at the end of the day, even though the compromise sounds pretty appealing, like it sounds the most practical and logical, there's also that burden of trying to go for both, which in some cases can lead to conflict. But I guess here's the key word to be remembered in this lesson, and this is the word that Joseph brought up that really got my light bulb flashing. Greatness, ambition, being the GOAT, being loved, none of it is free. There is always a price to it. There is a tradeoff. That's the word I was looking for. I've never really considered that word up until that late night podcast with the bros. It's a tradeoff. Whether it be a path of greatness or a path of normal happiness, there will always be something to lose. And conversely, something to gain. The question isn't what you'll choose, but rather it's how much you're willing to cry, bleed, suffer for the life you chose. Even at times, it feels like the wrong path. So regardless of which option you'll choose out of the three, how much are you willing to give for the people, the dreams, and the things that you're willing to fight for? Again, I know it's all over the place, but that's not really new in my videos. Nevertheless, I hope you guys learned something, especially you future homers watching back. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.